The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. It was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to you and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Hello everyone, welcome to our Hawaiian Volcano Tracker. I'm geologist Philip Ong, Earthmaster Dane DuPont, and our interpreters Daniel and Carrie Kaufman as always. Today is Thursday, July 17th, 2025. We are awaiting Kilauea's episode 29 of its ongoing summit eruption. And that's where we stand. We'll go through what we have to see. How are you doing today, Dane? How's your week been?
Doing good. Yeah, just kind of waiting, seeing what happens, and doesn't give us a lot of lead in right now. Kind of just waiting, but yeah, it's been good so far. And how you doing?
Yeah, doing great. Enjoying I'm kind of back refreshed after my time off and enjoying the new patterns of the volcano here. Seems a little bit different than before I left. We were just talking about that off air a little bit, how it seems like there's a little bit less of the precursory activity, less of the ramp up, and we're a little more on our toes these days, having to watch for when it might just burst out from the ground. So there we stand, and yeah, we'll get into it here. Anything else before we get into it?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we will see what we can do in the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Dane. So let's get ready for our summary. All right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian volcano summary for July 17th, 2025. Following last week's episode 28 of Kilauea's ongoing summit eruption, the volcano has recharged its magma and gas supply, such that the next episode is expected anytime in the next day or two. You're looking at a live cam, the V3 of the USGS here, showing ongoing gas emissions as we await sunset. But you can see that over the past week, most of the activity has been the actual slumping of the cinder and spatter cone that now ramps up to the western edge of the caldera. So even 8 days into our pause following the last episode, we see movement of the rock in this area that we now know from the USGS release last week is over 340 feet thick or 100 meters, and slumping under its own weight over that still hot fluid material. So if we look at our ground tilt, we can see the recovery of the volcano over the last 8 days or so since episode 28. We do see the transient effects of earthquake from Alaska occurring yesterday, but we are at about the threshold, just awaiting the onset of the fountaining for episode 29 here in Kilauea. The latest USGS update states this likely to happen between July 17th today and 18th tomorrow. And the biggest impact to people is still gas and tephra fallout. There are some lighter winds predicted, but the VOG forecast still puts most of the fallout and gas impact to the southwest of the volcano towards the area of Kau, Mauna Loa, and South Kona. Presently, air quality is good in all these areas, but when the emissions first come out, we expect the biggest impact to come through. Earthquakes have been quiet over the last week, with very few events under the summit, and most of the events happening under the south flank of the volcano. We see a few earthquakes in the Pahala feeder zone and in a shallower surface above them, likely a surface adjustment to that changing ground. Overall, earthquake counts are still very low per week ever since the onset of this eruption back in December 2024. The volcano continues to spread north and south between episodes and release when lava comes out, even as long-term its vertical component is very slowly dropping. On a rift zone, we see contraction north and south with no increased threat to people in the short term. So that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for this week. All right, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, it sounds, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. All right, so let's go to our hazard summary now. And we'll have a little bit to show you guys, not as much as a full episode here, but this is a period since the last episode to today, just the daytime views from the S2 camera. And while you can see the cones still slumping down, you see the gas flying in this very steady trade wind pattern from right to left and coming from this area in here. That's the north vent. The south vent, somewhere in here, is now all the way buried. It's hard to really see it at all. But we do see there's other areas that issue gas from the cracks up here as well. We'll see that in a better view coming up here. But just to show you guys, the gas output is steady and blowing to the southwest here. As I just showed you guys, the forecast comes from the VMAP, Fog Measurement and Prediction Project out of University of Hawaii at Manoa. And they have all different options of how to look at the hazards on their website, but we like to show you guys this, which is the concentration of the gases dispersed by the current weather forecast. So you can see that there's a little bit of an arm that swings north into the saddle north of Mauna Loa summit, but mostly to the south. I think Ocean View area continues to be impacted heavily. We mention it every week as just like, well, it's just what they have to deal with. But we have just heard tell that they're regularly distributing N95 masks over there because of the Pele's hair and other kind of particular particles that are falling out on a weekly basis, and they're just kind of now everywhere around the landscape. So it is a smaller impact than lava flows in the neighborhood, for example, but still an ongoing impact now, 7 months of it gathering in that area. And of course in nearby areas as well, but in a national park, people can still go and see the eruptions pretty well, and that's what we're hoping for this next episode. We showed you guys the baseline gas measurements. Here's the state website showing everything in the green, and we showed you guys purple air with everything in the green. A few of the values are slightly higher here in South Kona, but all within that green range. And in a national park, let's scroll down here. Everything also in the green on a map. And if we go to the historical charts, we can see that mostly everything is in the green, except for what you may have saw over here. At the Art Center, particulate matter seems to have spiked in the last couple of days. I'm not sure what this is about, since we did not actually have any eruptive activity. Perhaps more likely is some construction happening nearby, putting up the actual dust. There might be some dust falling to that PM 2.5 range. So interesting to note that it's just at that one site, and so not volcanic in nature there. One of the things you have to look for when you're sorting through the data, rich data set across a volcano like this. So that's our gas, and zooming way out to our windy sulfur dioxide layer here. Last week we saw this cloud of SO2 largely around the island. You can see it's dispersed a little bit to our west here. This is with no new big puff of gas, although the volcano continues to degas about 1,500 tons of SO2 every day in its inter-episode pauses, right? So it's still putting out gas, which is still significant, not as much as during the big pulses. And maybe that's adding to this trail you see here ongoing. So we like to look at our satellite captures on a daily basis as well. So here's our most recent capture showing these low-level emissions coming from Kilauea. See if I can zoom this in maybe and still manipulate it here. All right, so low-level emissions from Kilauea for the 15th. And go back in time, you get a little bit less. On the 12th, we catch it again. So a lot of it depends on exactly what time of day the satellite's flying over or how much has come out recently. So our update last week, we caught just this southern edge here of this cloud right here that wasn't scanned. And then the following day, we got the remains of it blowing offshore from Kona. So you see that there was an impact and just not exactly caught in a snapshot of the satellite here. So that's what we're bracing for the next one. And every time one of these new episodes comes up, and at the very start is when we see that surge in gas emissions to the range of 20,000 tons per day or more potentially. So that does it for our hazard summary, which is largely the gases and the fallout. And so now we'll turn to our visual observations, practice of kilo in the Hawaiian tradition here in Kilauea. And to start, we'll go back to our S2 camera, and I'll pull you guys just the nighttime views over the last week. So we see a little bit of this incandescence as the cone is slumping under its own weight and exposes spots of glow. And you see the cone itself that's right in here in the center starts off with much more strong glow. And over the course of the week, night after night, it becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. Right, really, for much of the last 2 nights, you see not much at all. You do see some incandescence from the actual cone where it's slumping apart itself. A different view of this would be the V3 camera, which is zoomed in to there as well. So it's not catching quite as wide of a view, but there is the vent with a glow, bits of lava moving down as the cone slumps and continuing to glow over the course of the week. And we saw a couple flashes, but not nearly as bright. So you imagine that there is some still gas pistoning process happening in the conduit below there, but the top seems to be a little bit more crusted over following this most recent episode than some of the previous episodes. So that maybe is dampening the glow a little bit there. Looking at that same V3 camera, but just at daytime views. This is what we started off showing you guys. You can see this movement of the cone slumping down. And I want to zoom it way in so you can see here near the vent how even here at the 7th and 8th day on, we still see stuff moving, albeit slowly, in that slump. And in this freeze frame, you can see over here this upper crack putting out gas, this one over here as well. There's a couple of these other spots. So as this cone slumps under its own weight and over this very hot material, some of it's still putty-like in there. It's so hot and gooey. You can have that heat and gas released through these upper cracks as well. So one more time, that one. And just to recap, in case you missed last week, that last episode, the south vent was not active and was largely buried by material from the north vent, so you don't see much of it over here. But perhaps some of this gas cloud in the upper slope might be some remnants of that pathway. And we won't be able to tell until we see what happens in the future with these eruptive sites and whether that one reopens or whether we focus in the north vent moving forward. So it's often easier to see the full crater in the thermal view. We can see day and night continuously. And so let's look at the F1 camera here. And this one I've rewound back to just before the previous eruption, episode of the eruption. So episode 28, precursor activity, fountain, and flows right here. So here's 1 week ago now when we have the still movement of the flows following the end of the fountain. You see that they end sooner further away and they keep moving closer to the vent for the longest. And you see the heat still there. You see heat from the ooze up flow on the far side of the crater. But mostly during this week, there's not a lot happening here. Mostly it's just the same spots of heat, nothing fresh, no new ooze up flows, no overturning, just the slumping of the cone happening near the vent. And it's almost present, and here we go to just a couple hours ago. So looking at some different views here, this is the B1 camera, and I've just taken the whole last week, 1 image per day at noon, so we can see what's happening on the east side of the crater floor. And we do this so we can assess whether lava is injecting below the crust all the way on this eastern side. And if I zoom in here, I can come all the way to this easternmost tip here, and you can clearly see the wiggle. I've had this on loop, so it looks like it's wiggling up and down, right? But it's just looping around. You can see movement, inflation of the crust all through here. Some spots it's moving pretty wildly, some spots not at all. And so that's the eastern edge. I'll kind of pan it across. It's a little bit of flicker from a cloud shadow that comes through here, but it's something to ignore when you look at the movement of the actual features. Like this remains of the September 2023 cinder cone. You can see bobbing up here as well, all the way to the near field here. And this, remember, this is the period since the fountain ended last week and before this new fountain comes today or tomorrow or whenever it be in the next few days here. So in these times between fountains, we're still seeing lava moving, injecting underneath the crust and causing inflation in not just the areas where we had ooze up flows, which is an area like this, but also further afield, connected to that area perhaps, but all the way to the eastern edge of the crater over here, rising up and down. There's one spot right in here that's pretty wild. If you look, here's the edge of this movement. It looks like this thing is bobbing up and down like a seesaw, right? So you can see how much it actually has moved in consort with the one over here. And you can see it almost looks like a heartbeat there, pulsing. Do-doom, do-doom. One and the other, one and the other. So that's pretty cool to see over the last week, is this movement inflation on the eastern side of the crater. And if we pan the view further back towards the cone, we can see there is movement there as well. And so the most obvious thing is the actual cone itself slumping and sliding down over the last week. You can see how much the material is moving there, but also how far downslope this process extends. You see it spills out of view here to this embayment to the southwest, this little nook right in there, hidden from view. And it's also pushing out to the east-northeast. And you can see that as it's doing that, we also see some settling of the ground, like a little bit of deflation in the areas closer by, somewhere in here. So that's happening at the same time as you see the swelling coming up over here. Yeah, if you look close, you see they're moving in opposite motions there. So really fascinating stuff to see over the last week, but no red lava coming out since the last fountain here. And just to put this further back, let's show you guys a B1 for the last few months, 2 months, 2.5 months or so. So you can see a little bit more clearly how this growth of the cone has manifested. So you see it's really been fairly recently that it's lapped up all the way up to the upper edge here. And that's why it's falling down so much. So pan this back up so you can see the date here. We're going July, May, June, July, essentially here from the very end of April. So just in those last 2 months, 2.5 months, you've seen the cone maybe doubling in size there. And continued swelling here on the eastern side. So put it all the way to the east. So you can see how this has progressed as well. Yeah, and this is a process that if it continues for long enough, we'll keep filling this crater and layering. And it's got all the space. Here is the next lowest edge that it can fill in. So that's where it can go next, is somewhere in there. So that means it's all contained and no further threat to people. And we still have a ways. If it does this for another year, maybe we'll have to worry about it doing something different. But until then, we'll keep at this pattern here. So we have been using this technique of looking at these fast views every day of the B1 camera. We now have the KW camera back online in this area looking the other direction. It hasn't been online for as long, but we'll start doing this with that camera as well to see whether there's movement elsewhere in a crater floor that this camera sees and the other one doesn't. So the B1 camera is all the way over here looking back across. So we're now looking at the reverse angle. So what you can see is that following the end of the flows here, we're seeing a similar massive movement in this near vent area of the cone slumping and sliding down. You see in that first day or two, much of this flow still moves, but it lurches to a stop for a lot of this loop here. So it was moving in the day after the eruption ended, or the last episode of the eruption ended, but then stopped even as this other stuff continues to move near the vent. And you don't see anything else, no other ooze-ups, no other uplift or motion anywhere except for this pattern right in here. And if anything, you can see right where this branch of the flow is coming in, how this area of the crater over here seems to sag and like deflate a little bit there over this week. It's pretty fascinating. And back to our current views. So that takes us to right now. We're looking at what is happening. There's a V3 camera, lots of degassing happening. Same in the V1. Looks like the lens is cleared up a little bit. And on the V1. And we'll just await the next sign on one of these cameras and off we'll go. In the meantime, as the USGS waits, they today flew a drone mission, unmanned uncrewed aircraft system mission, UAS. And so I'll show you guys some of these images from there. And so here they are, the technicians preparing to launch, probably doing their pre-flight check. A photo by Mike Solar. These are all done with permission of the national park by special permit. This is not something anyone can do. But here they are preparing. The next one, they're coming back in to land on the landing pad here. Notice how they're wearing protective gear, including those N95 masks as well, for the same reason, for this fine particulate matter. This just looks like a tephra field here, but if you look closely, there's a double yellow center line of the old crater rim drive, which is covered in all this new material that's fallen out from the fountains. So, yep. After an observational pass, they were coming back to the landing pad. Just checking the caption on these to show you guys, make sure I'm missing anything. All right, here's a view from that flight, a near vertical view down into the north vent, south vent area here, heavily fumed over. So you can look in there, you see covered pad of lava right in there, and here you don't see much because of the fume. Maybe a crack that could emit some glow in there, but hard to see much through this gas cloud right here. And the aircraft was about 500 feet, 150 meters above the vent, north to the upper left, that way. No incandescence visible at that time. And a few more images are released. Here is that same road near where it was buckled by collapse in 2018, with the fresh tephra overlying the double yellow line here. So photo by Katie Milliken there, underscoring the hazardous nature of this area that's remained closed to the public. Since 2008, it's been closed. A long time now. Okay, and now looking at a view of this western rim where this tephra fallout's making this new hill over here, right? This new mound, and this other fantastic photo by Katie Milliken is she points out how this profile is not unlike Mauna Loa's profile here in the background, one of the largest shield volcanoes that you can clearly see here. So let's come back here. That mound is nearly 100 feet, 30 meters tall after 28 episodes, with a mound profile mirroring Mauna Loa. Okay, another view here, more from the ground looking at the vent area. So it's a very similar view as we see out of the V3 camera, but I like it because it's actually showing us a little bit better resolution. For example, let's look right in here, you see these big cracks putting out fume, and you can see how they're all red on the inside with the cracks here. Hopefully that's showing up on your screen. And that's because all this material is hot and is essentially being oxidized or baked, so we've got a very high iron content, somewhere around 50%. No, sorry, I'm sorry, that's not right. Somewhere around 10 or 11%, somewhere in there, I believe. Enough to cause this essentially rusting. I got my percentages wrong. Something is going, my wires are crossing my brain here, but in any case, enough iron in here that it's causing this rusting effect. You see it turn this gunky reddish orange color because it's still hot inside of this pile of sheet after sheet of tephra that's falling down on this cone here. So, pretty fascinating, and showing south vent completely covered as well in this field of view. Okay, the last one they've released here is this satellite image following the tephra deposits following the most recent episodes, July 9th capture. And coming forward, let's make this a little bit bigger and visible. It's hard to see exactly. It seems like to me like they're talking about this darker pattern in here being the edge of the tephra fallout zone. So it looks to me like it's something like that, more or less, if I had to sketch it. of where the fountain has dropped material. And you can see it approaches Highway 11 in this area around here most closely. But there are other areas downwind as well, all the way over here. So that's the visuals USGS has offered us today. And with that, I will pass it to Dane and Lou, and we will do Community Corner, but we will first feature an update on Pohoiki from Dane. So to you, Dane and Lou.
All right. I will bring in Lou. Or do you want to stay on for this part? And then I'll bring on Lou afterwards.
As you wish.
All right. All right. So we were so generous to get some images from an associate of ours, Andrew Hara, and he was able to get down there after the initial dredge. I'm going to start calling this part that you see right here the initial dredge, and I'll explain that in a minute. But we can see how they've cut in and removed the sand and the shape of the beach so far. And I'll go ahead and cycle through some of these. So we have that frontal view. We can see how up at the entry of the water, there's more rock than there is sand. That's been true for a few years at this point, at least. And the house in the background there, where we have the time-lapse cameras mounted. So generous by the family to allow us to do that. Just getting some different shots in the background there. You can see to the right on the new lava flows. First, the storage area that they are using to put all this sand and sediment and rock. And further behind that, you can see the reestablishment of the red road. Almost looks like they have some kind of pavement down out there, but I'm not so sure yet. But progress is, and we have more information coming on that, I believe, tomorrow. So we'll check that out. But I do want to show that road and crossing 3.5 miles over that new lava flow. So cool to get that back. And you can see the storage area and how much sand they've put up there already. Doesn't look like a huge amount at this point. The one thing I want to talk about, I'll talk about while I just let the time lapse of the since the activity down there began with the dredge. So what has come to light is that the shape of the profile of the mouth of the dredge might just funnel some the wave action in towards the house on the shoreline. And as such, there's been some modifications that have been proposed, and they're Dilbar and DLNR are trying to figure out how much of this extra material that is there currently on the far side of the time lapse that you're looking at now off to the right, how much more of that can be removed to potentially help prevent any flooding or significant wave action coming into the dock, because it's not just about the house. Significant wave action coming into the dock one way or another is going to hamper the ability to use the dock efficiently. So they're trying to make these changes, and we haven't seen anything proposed yet. I think they're going to be maybe presented at some point. But yeah, that's kind of what we have now. Seeing if you had anything to add there, Phil, since you did get a chance to talk to Finn McCall from Dobar.
Yeah, I mean, he said what you basically just said there. Said that they're worried about the inundation. They might potentially build a seawall there in front of the house to prevent that moving forward as well. But that's not going to help the dock, obviously. So they still need to try to shape the channel a better initial shape. I'll put it like that, because it may change over time with the wave action that we're talking about here.
So yeah, we don't know exactly what it will look like. They don't know how much of the more of the material, but in general, our philosophy still remains: the more material that they can remove from there, the better. The less of it's likely to come back at that point. So awesome to hear that they're going to take more material. I hope they can take as much as possible. But yeah, I believe that's it for Pohoiki. The timeline does not really change in terms of construction. Right now, the next heavy piece of equipment is the crane that would be used to break the mouth of the channel. That equipment comes in early August. So whatever is going to happen probably will happen in the next couple of weeks would be my guess. So fast timeline, I'd assume, maybe over the next month. But this initial profile, likely to change. All right. Thank you,
Awesome.
Phil.
Thanks, Dane.
I will get Lou over here, and we will get into Community Corner. See you in a bit. Hey, welcome in, Lou.
Hey.
You have any Pohoiki comments since you've been down there and keeping up with this?
No, I've been with this the whole time with you guys, right? And it's something we've talked about on. We kind of knew things were going to come up, right? And we expected more so the storyline of a storm coming through and the beach erosion, waves. But you brought up a good point. It's more than just the house there. The boat ramp becomes useless if the waves are knocking around a 25 or 35 foot fishing boat trying to go in there. It's extremely dangerous. So there's going to be some more planning, I think, involved in this. And They were so close, right? They were so close to getting that crane down and going for it. I'm glad they caught it.
Yeah, and it's awesome they have a little bit of time to maybe modify the plan, especially with a plan like this that never been done before. Having to make a modification to the design once you get into it and start working on it isn't all that unexpected, really. And I'm glad that they're being flexible enough to be able to make those changes as opposed to just being like, oh, well, this is what we designed and this is what we got approved, so this is what we're doing.
Yeah, nice advantage of being ahead of schedule, I guess. Can think about things instead of always, coming up from behind because we're behind schedule. So it's good.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and cue Community Corner for you.
All right. Who do I have on deck here? Oh, there's Carrie. All right. Good to see Carrie and Dano this weekend. We're going to talk about that in a second. But let's cruise the park. There's a new update going on up the park. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. Here's our normal construction closures and delays that everybody is familiar with. Take it slow. And here is some very bad news. Restrooms at Nahuku Lava Tube temporarily closed. They had a water line rupture, so we've lost one of our 2 flushable toilets up there. So go back to the porta potties. Just know if that was your go-to, it's going to be working on that one for a little while. Just got it up and running. I think, Dane, how long has this been up and going? Like
about 8 minutes, I think. No, I don't know. It doesn't feel that long, and it feels like that one goes down a lot.
It doesn't, right? Oh, man.
I remember somebody saying, and now we have the bathroom set up so it'll last. Well,
yeah.
It's hard when the water lines get rattled all day by the little earthquakes and stuff.
Who in the chat here jinked stuff? All right, here. So I pulled a nice little shot from one of the Discord members, Brooke. She's this is a good example. Everybody always asks us throughout the week where to view the lava, and we always say there's everywhere. No matter where you're at in that park, there's a good chance you're going to be able to see some lava, and there are plenty of places to beat the crowd. Inbounds. I'm not saying go out of bounds, stay inbounds in safe areas, but this is just over on the Volcano House side, walking around. There are all kinds of places to view. So this is our drive into the visitor center, into the park. Right here is our main entrance. And as you come in, there is an update from Yvonne. She sent this to me yesterday on the roundabout. Asphalt is going in. Check that out. That is a big, fat roundabout.
Oh, man. I like that they made it big instead of like some of the other roundabouts that we have around here.
Yeah, and it looks like they still have another, 10 feet on the side here. They're going to fill in, so excellent job. That's going to be good. I know how much you really enjoy roundabouts. And watch out when visiting. Watch out for the nene on the road in parking areas along roadsides. I talk about this quite often, but right now it's more important than ever. This is the time of year when nene begin to flock up and establish bonds ahead of nesting season. Yvonne was out and about, and she gathered these shots here, and you can see they're all grouped up. Usually you see them in twos, just in pairs, but they're all kind of I don't know, maybe this is a little party going on. Help ensure these majestic geese survive. Please slow down and give these threatened state birds a break. Never feed the nene. Don't eat their berries and give them plenty of space. Safety first up there. They have some work going on. The western overlook accessed by a path just past the bus parking at Waikahuna will temporarily close for safety improvements on July 14th for a few weeks. Don't worry about the next eruption. The observation deck and crater rim trail to the east towards the Kilauea overlook will remain open. This is from last week. Yvonne is hot on picking up any type of voids that are out there. I'm not sure if this one's been filled in, but I left this on here as a reminder that you're walking around at night, point the flashlight at the ground, keep an eye on your feet because you don't know what's down there. Not just rocks to stumble over, but there may be other voids out there. This is up there at the Steeman Bluffs. Kilauea Iki Trail is going under some renovations. The park's hard-working trail crew will repair and reinforce the western switchback starting Monday, July 7th. This is the far end of Kilauea Iki if you're looking into the crater from the parking lot. What's that mean for the hikers? Well, the western switchbacks will temporarily close Monday through Thursday from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Switchbacks will be open to hikers outside of those hours. The rest of the popular 3.3-mile loop will remain open. This work will be completed by September 30th. Another group of projects here on Hawaii Island that are moving right along, kind of I don't want to say ahead of schedule, but on schedule. Traffic alerts, eruption and construction. Back to the roundabout, you saw the new asphalt in. It's going in all over the park, and trucks cannot sit in traffic, so park rangers may reroute or escort them into the park. Hilo-bound traffic may be temporarily held at the entrance to allow trucks through. Park appreciates your patience. There is a shot that Yvonne sent me of the new asphalt that's going in. Roads are usually pretty good in that park till the earthquakes get them, and they do a good job of keeping them up. That's a fat layer of asphalt going in. There is our Kilauea Military Camp Welcome Center while our renovation is going on to the Visitor Center. And there's a map in case you don't know. This is the first time watching on how to get there. You just drive through the entrance and all the way up, and you can't miss it. Look for the big American flag there. And there's our good buddy Dean, Ranger Dean. Go talk to him and any of the rangers in there, and they will let you know about life on the edge. Learn about Hawaii geology, culture, plants, and animals. That's in the Kilauea Welcome Center. There are other events or ranger-led programs that are happening and junior ranger programs that are up there. All of them are weather and ranger dependent. So definitely got to check in with the ranger station to find out what's going on. I left this in here. This was on the NPS site. Somebody had sent me a message and how much they liked it. And there is a lot of this type of information up there. There was a few of these slides in there and I just left this one because the park has on their website, safety is your responsibility, but they do help you out and help you prevent getting lost or injured. So if you're going to the park and you're new to hiking, check this out. And we'd like to throw a little shout out to our partners, HAKA, the Hawaii Animal Kuleana Alliance. Them, as well as us and many, many others, attended the Revitalize Puna event this weekend in the rain, and they had their models there, did a fantastic job, and did all kinds of stuff there. And there is us outside. It was pouring rain. There's Dane sitting over there. Dane ended up wetter than an otter's pocket that day, but it was a lot of fun. We did our elephant toothpaste, and Dane had the lava board going with the lava flows. We had the inside the setup with our viscosity bubblers. So a fun event. Thank you to everybody that came out and said hi to us, took some pictures. And HVERI is a community-based 501c3 community-based program. Let me get that out. To make a donation, visit our website, hveri.org/donate to help us out. We'd appreciate that. And we have another event coming up next week, and we'll have some new photos for that. And if you would like to be notified for an eruption, go ahead and sign up for our email, hveri.org/subscribe. Dane will throw that up there. Thank you, Dane. and you can get subscribed. We will get an email out to you right about the time we think she's going to start fountaining. Right, Dane? We've been pretty good on this one.
Yep. I mean, it's kind of morphed and evolved, but that's where we're at now. At least we're trying to make it the most useful type of information. So if we change eruption styles and go to something else, then what we're emailing would probably change. But as of right now, with 28 episodes and 29 on the horizon, that's kind of what we can expect for at least the foreseeable future.
Yep. And you can follow us on many different social sites. You can pick your choosing here. Find us somewhere. Find us on multiples. We pretty much post all over, so you won't miss us. I did post earlier today in the chat our website, hveri.org, and you can go on there and see all of our latest news articles if you missed it on a social media post in case it got funneled through. Check it out. And there we go, Dane.
Yeah. So we'd like to thank first the County of Hawaii through the Kilauea Recovery, Puna Strong, and Bye grant programs for helping make this program that we do here with volcano education, as well as our digital resilience and our youth development possible. We also like to thank, the viewers like you that tune in, the likes, subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff goes a long way to helping with the algorithm. I know all the people on social media talk about it. It is true, and it does help out. And if you are so inclined to help beyond that, we do take donations. We take super chats over on YouTube, but we do encourage people to go over to the hveri.org/donate to make donations. However, we really appreciate, whatever support we can get in whatever form that it comes in. So with that, we did have a donation that came through from Norm, a longtime supporter, and $10. No comment. Appreciate the continued support there. And I think that gets us.
Hey, got one more, Dane, here. One more for us. I wanted to say mahalo to Carrie and Dano. They did attend the event, and they were interpreting down there, giving our deaf community an opportunity to be involved in disaster preparedness on the island, and much appreciated, you guys.
All right. Thank you, Lou. And thank you, Carrie and Dano. And I will get Phil back in here. Thanks, Lou.
You got it.
Is that the one you wanted? All right. You're muted, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Dane.
Yep.
Yeah, just getting a slide in there that I forgot to put in. So we'll turn now to our Kilauea monitoring. And I'll just show today's update since we are between episodes and there hasn't been anything else that I found to highlight for you guys. As we said, we're likely to start anytime now. In detail, I'll come down here. They say that episode 29 is likely to take place later today or tomorrow, with a slight chance of delay until Saturday. That's assuming the inflation rate does not change significantly, or else the window will be adjusted. And so that's most of what we have in here. We still have continuing reassurance that nothing's happening in the rift zones. We have this sulfur dioxide emission rate of 1,200 to 1,500 tons per day happening between episodes, still ongoing. And as of this morning at 9 a.m., they stated that of the 15 microradians lost in deflation during episode 28, we had recovered 14.4 of them. And if we come to the tilt, you'll see that maybe we've recovered that other 0.6 since 9 o'clock this morning as well. So this is what the text update says. This is why we're still on standby, just continuing to check. And if anyone sees it go off, let us know. We're trying to look here as well, but looking at a couple other things as well. So here is the USGS timeline page that they put up for each episode. And I just thought I'd put this up here today because as time goes on, they add information and update. And so for episode 28, we now have one updated piece of information, which is the fountain heights. They had reported these earlier as 365 or 1,200 feet. And so they've revised this in the table downwards to 320. that's closer to 1,050 feet or so. Okay, so it's a little bit lower. If you look at the fountain heights for the last three, we come down from 26 had the highest fountains at 380, 27 a little bit lower, and 28 a little bit lower still here. And to show you this visually, I have here, let's look at this left part of the graph here, and that's the Kilauea ongoing eruption now. And so our most recent episode 28 had been plotted last week. We had it all the way up to here, but today we drop it back down to this 1,050 height. Still within this higher range that we're seeing steady here for the last 7 episodes, but not quite as high as we had thought. And the other part of this image here on the right is the pattern that we saw at Pu'o'o from 1983 to 86, where we saw similarly increase in fountain heights over time with a couple of these little resets, like we have one here on 2025 sequence as well. And what we saw is that eventually, after a high peak, we saw those fountain heights coming down, especially after episode 39 here. We really saw them coming down quite a bit. So we seem to still be growing or not yet to our peak on our current activity if this Pu'o'o pattern is anything to go by. So that's one of the update graphs we can show you here. I also wanted to show you this image, which is from Pu'o'o, the duration of each episode in hours. And for them, they really saw the stabilization of episode length here towards the back half of the sequence, right? And so just for comparison, here's what it looks like for us this year. And the longest duration we have is for 17. That was the one that didn't quite have high fountains, but went at low levels for quite a bit longer. But really, since that reset that we had there, we've been likewise fairly stable within a small range of duration of fountains here. So we found a sweet spot. It's a little bit stable here. On average, we're somewhere around this 8 hours or so. And next, I'll show you guys the time between these episodes. So inter-fountain duration in days here for our current activity. Here we have it. I put in for 28 where we are as of 5 p.m. today. So we're at 8 days and counting. This will go as far as it needs to until the eruption episode happens. This last one here, but otherwise you can see that this most recent set are also a little bit stabilized at a bit of a higher value, right? So this is an interesting thing to look at here. A little bit higher than we had before. If you look at this group of pauses right here in the middle of the sequence, they seem to be more around this maybe 6 or 7 day interval, right? About once a week. And now we seem to be a little bit longer than that, right? That's how come we had one just before last week's update, and here we are a full week later, and we still have not had our episode. Slightly longer interval between these manifesting here. So I just show that because that's something that in the Pu'o'o sequence, they also had a stabilization, and that was towards the end, right? So hard to say exactly where we are, how it ends up, but having very little else to go on, these Pu'o'o graphs are just one point of comparison on Kilauea. The biggest difference being, of course, that Pu'o'o is on a rift zone, and Kilauea's current eruption at Halema'u is at the summit. So that our interval between episodes is much shorter overall. Here, we're talking about, on average, about a week or so, compared to at Pu'o'o, it was on average about a month or so. So that's a big difference there. So a lot of caveats, but still that's what we have to compare. And in case you missed a little bit more of our analysis last week, I'll just recap 2 of these images. This is the preliminary volume of each eruption, episodes 1 through 28 here. And so what you can see is there's a variation. It goes up and down, and maybe you can see small trends within a pattern, But overall, there's not a lot of variation. There, for the most part, about the same amount of lava comes out every single time, right? And that's something that was also true at Pu'o'o, where they also saw about the same amount of lava coming out every single time, regardless of how long it had been since the start of the eruption. Which means that with a longer interval and shorter durations, that the lava is getting out faster. The same amount of lava is coming out every time, but it's doing so more efficiently. So here we have a comparison of the discharge rate compared to days from the onset. On the left is our current Hale Maunaloa activity. What you can see is that the most recent episodes, 23, 24, 25, 26, 23, all the way through 28, all these are the highest ones. The most recent ones have been the highest discharge rates. So lava is getting out easier over time, which is something they also saw in the Pu'o'o era for a while, until towards the end they saw it drop off. And so we're not seeing that quite yet either. But once again, our caveats of we're not sure what we're really comparing it to. This is the only comparison we really have here to this level of detail. There was one other high fountaining phase at Kilauea Summit that we know. That's Kīlauea, but we don't have nearly this wealth of data, and it only had the 17 episodes over the 1 month. So it's hard to compare that to this longer sequence that we have now. And thus the Pu'o'o comparison is the one we have to use here. All right, so then one thing I just wanted to wrap up this part of it with, this is coming back to this image that we have of thicknesses of lava through episode 24. And we've talked about this a little bit last week as well. And so I'll zoom it in. The maximum thickness here is 100 meters, 340 feet, right above the vent. So what this means is that if you imagine the pre-eruption surface, so we're talking about December 22nd last year, that was 340 feet lower. Where this crack originally opened up, the actual mouth of it originally is down 100 meters below the top of that cone. So if we're thinking about the conduit, the actual nozzle of this fountain itself, that upper 100 meters, 340 feet or so, has been built just for material deposited in the last 7 months. And then below that, even though we opened up as a crack, it seems like it actually focused on 2 vents, north vent and south vent in the end. The other one's shutting off. And then something blocking the south vent now. But we imagine that those thin cracks over time as a fountain pushes its way out of it. Essentially, it like reams them out. It wears them open, rubs them open so that they become more of this circular shape. And then that's your whole nozzle of the fountain there, right? And so I wanted to bring this up as I've been reading some of the old papers of the Pu'o'o fountain dynamics and all of that. And in some of those cases, they think that the actual bottom of the spray of the lava fountain is similarly hundreds of feet down in the ground, right? And so like something like at this depth, 500, 600 feet underground of the present surface, you might only have 1/3 of the volume might be lava and 2/3 is actually gas trying to blow all that stuff out of there, right? So if you think about what we actually see at the surface, the fountain coming up and it's 1,000 feet or what have you, that's just from the ground surface upwards. But down within the third of the thing, at least this far down and likely even further into the old ground surface, there's the actual conduit, the funnel, the nozzle for these fountains that spring up with all this force. So that's something interesting to think about. I can add to our discussion here this week. And with that said, we'll just touch base on our monitoring data. So our crater elevation that saw this surge during the episode last week, you see is having these slight variations that seem like the daily temperature cycles perhaps, or some kind of effect like that. But otherwise, overall pattern is it's gradually sagging, deflating as well, right? So I've seen from some of the similar reports that within the crater floor, those lava flows often can have 30%, like 1/3 of them is gas space. So over time, if they're still fluid enough that the gas can coalesce and escape, then they can actually subside over time and kind of sag downwards as the gas escapes. Up close to the vent, the pieces of tephra, some of those are 90% gas. For comparison, when they're trying to add up like volumes, right, in pool areas, they'd add up how much tephra fell all over the cone and say, okay, well, 10% of that volume is actually the equivalent amount of lava that really is there, plus a whole bunch of gas. And on the ground where lava is coming out, similarly, but you'd have 30% gas content there. So that's what we're seeing here with this dropping of the elevation over time, likely that gas release, and then some artifacts on top of that, likely from the measuring equipment. In that same week, here's our tilt in blue at the summit, showing similar these daily cycles we're used to seeing now. And in green, the rift zone showing long-term deflation. We do see this, what we call in geology, a teleseism, an earthquake from far away. In this case, it was the Alaska earthquake that for a while disrupted the tilt signal, right? And so one quick clue about the difference in those is like when we have an earthquake that's local, you have the P wave and the S wave and the surface waves, they all come back to back to back within a few minutes normally, right? Our tilt meter here sample is usually once every 15 minutes. So when an earthquake is very large and comes from far away, then the period can extend for several hours. And so what you see here is this big fat chunk of ink showing that for more than an hour, the tilt meter was swaying back and forth on a long period motion of that seismometer. And we've seen in the past other animations, at least I have, I'm not sure if I think After Dark in the Park with Tim Orr comes to mind, where he talks about similarly in 2018 catching teleseisms from faraway earthquakes and seeing all stations in the crater move one way, then the other way, then back and forth, and didn't really change what was happening in the volcano here, but you could see the volcano was moving and swaying all together. So perhaps it had been just in a point where all it needed was one little push to erupt, and maybe that was something that could have happened, but that's not what happened back then. That's not what happened yesterday either. We just saw the continuing pattern of tilt, almost as if nothing had happened at the summit here. Our earthquakes, you can see that there is a jump in earthquakes that occurred as well, but this is requires a little bit closer inspection. This is the same period of time. One of the reasons I show these plots like this lined up is that we actually have the same time interval pretty close for both graphs here. So when I look at this period right here, and I scroll my page up, then I can see that right here is where that earthquake from Alaska would have been. And prior to that, we see two big jumps in seismic moment. That's this red line that's with a scale on the right here, showing there was a cluster of earthquakes. And I can kind of keep scrolling down and see that here they are, these two orange events that if I keep going, here they are, two orange events in this shallow Pahala zone, being the cluster of seismicity that flared up yesterday before the Alaska earthquake arrived, actually. Right, so that's what that jump happens to be there, unrelated, and just sorting out, untangling some of these signals here. Okay, so moving on, there is the earthquake map. Pretty quiet in the summit overall. That's likely because of this release of any pressure through the summit vent. Very quiet on the rift zone itself, and quieter than usual, but still active to some degree on the south flank here, and more so in the south of the summit region than in the further Middle East rift. So still adjusting, it's always moving. It's moving a little slower than we're used to. Nothing to be alarmed about here. Okay, so for the last month, similar kind of examination of the data. We have a longer period of time now. So here's our laser looking at the depth to the crater floor. So there was before 28 jumped it up. that surge came across, and then it degassed down to right in there. There's 29 and jumped up. And here's our most recent degassing phase here. So we expect it to once again jump up when we see the next episode put a surge of flows across there. It either comes all the way up and comes back down like a flash flood where it surges across and then recedes, or it just comes as a sheet that just raises a level somewhat more of a step, either way. There's our tilt, Uekahuna in blue, Pu'o'o in green. So on this azimuth, you can see here that we're just above maybe 6 microradian threshold here. We'll come to somewhere around 5 for 28, and then now we're above 5. So we're actually, if you look at this, we're right in that ballpark of where anytime now the thing can go. And maybe I should reload this since this is a couple hours owed here, and show you guys, yep, even a little bit higher now. There it is. Similar data from the Sand Hill station, although the pattern is slightly different. Right there, you can see that same distant earthquake signal. And here's our 1 month earthquake counts, earthquakes per day, showing the Shalapahala sequence there that we just pointed out. Otherwise, pretty low events per day over the past week. If you're curious about this past one over here, we can similarly look at that one. We'll come down here again, right? So there's the most recent Pahala cluster. You can see there was some other events that happened, but nothing major happening there to cause this big spike. Lots of small earthquakes by the jump in the blue bar. No big ones because of the lack of jump in the red line. One way to look at this data here. Okay, the last 3 months, tilt, there is a pattern. So yeah, we're right falling into that. Since eruption onset, it looks like that. Looks like it's about ready to go there. The last year of earthquakes per week, very low since December, as we mentioned. And the GPS showing this wide range, right? You can see since last week, we are, let's say this might be somewhere around 1.5 centimeters, we'll call it. And up here, we'll call this 8.5, so maybe 7 centimeters of offset there. What's that in inches? 7 centimeters is 2 3/4 inches. That 2 mile bowl spread in 1 week as pressure builds underneath it, and it's going to release all of it again in the next couple of days and do it again the following week. That's the scale of the heaving of the ground. This Kilauea, it's almost like inhale, exhale in a sense, right? But fill with magma, exhale magma, fill with magma, inhale, exhale magma, something like that. And at Pu'o'o, we have a data gap here, but we can see the continuation with the data coming back online of this pattern of contraction. So nothing to worry about in the East Rift for now. The longer this pattern to summit continues, the more bot time we have on a rift, essentially, is what's happening here. And the X factor, as always, is the south flank, whether it moves and changes the dynamics we have now to then cause a shift towards the rift, right? So that's kind of where we are presently in the big picture. Why we monitor this, so it's just still contracting with no shift or anything like that happening. And that's our monitoring signals for the last 5 years. It's really this new era since December. This has really been different than everything else. Episodic fountainings keeps us long-term fairly steady, right? There's our low earthquakes per month since December. And if you look at our GPS extension, north and south across the crater, even our wiggling we're doing week to week here is pretty minor compared to what we've done in the last 5 years. Most of that you can see inclined here in the last few years, and over the last 7 months, very, very shallow increase here. So not nearly what was happening before. So much more efficient at getting out the magma and the pressure. So the final thing is looking at GPS here. We was talking about how the GPS is expanding, but we also can look at these 2-year GPS plots, and we have a few of them here around the summit. Of these, the lowest panel is a up and down component, and that's what I'm most interested in. And you can see here at the outlet, looks like we maybe are missing 1 or 2 days of data, but you can see we're on a slow drop in elevation at the southwest part, the south part of the caldera. There in the middle of the east part, similarly, very slow but stable, or if anything, dropping in elevation. And south at Ohua, near the summit, 1.5 miles away, likewise dropping in elevation very slowly. And this is very different from what we've seen. This is the last 2 years here. You can see it's been rising, dropping only through a little eruption, rising. And so as our long-term eruption with episodes every week continue, that's led to this long-term dropping elevation. So the summit is getting further apart, but dropping down at the same time, which is different than when it was really swelling, building up over the last 10 years, where it was coming apart and rising at the same time. And for completeness, the pool O signal, there it is, also dropping in elevation. So those are our monitoring signals here. We've talked about earthquakes already, but if we can look at these other couple of maps plotted by depth here over the last week. And there's our deep Pahala events. There's a couple events on the side of Mauna Loa, a 2.2, 5 miles down on the flank, 0.1 miles down, 2.9. So Mauna Loa is adjusting there as well. Deep settlement, 13 miles underneath the area between Mauna Loa and Kilauea, but deep enough that it's below both of them. And there's our Kilauea pattern that we just examined right in here, right, with those events on the south flank in the last week, magnitude 2, 1.8, 1.8, 1.7, those ones being in the signal there we saw. The other earthquake map, plotted by time now. So not any in the last couple hours, just one in the last day here in orange down there, right in there. And the largest of the set were a couple magnitude 3s, both around 20 miles down, right around Pahala, one onshore and one offshore. The third one, 2.9 onshore as well. So pretty common for Pahala. The Pahala cluster maybe is a little bit slower than before. Maybe that's related to this episodic outlet at the Kilauea summit, but we can only speculate on that. But we can note that there are still earthquakes happening in Pahala. They seem to be a little bit less than before. And so with that, we'll turn to our volcano watch. And volcano watch this week has to do with Mauna Loa, remembering a destructive eruption 75 years ago is our topic this week. This refers to the 1950 Southwest Rift Zone eruption, the volcano's most recent eruption to have caused significant damage. So 75 years ago is when this occurred, from June of 1950. And so to just recap a little bit of what's written in here, let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Before 1950, there were 30 eruptions back to 1843, which means on average every 3 to 4 years. And since 1950, there have only been 3 eruptions. So really 1950 was a major change in how the volcanoes are erupting, where Mauna Loa had her last hurrah of that phase, and then passed the baton to Kilauea, and Kilauea has become more active since 1950. Not shutting out Mauna Loa entirely, obviously. Mauna Loa still has those 3 eruptions, but dominating the number of eruptions and the volume output for sure. So they say here that pattern that we've talked about before is what occurred. First, an eruption at the summit region above 12,000 feet, then a migration of magma into the Southwest Rift. In that case, they had in May 1950 a magnitude 6.4 earthquake occurring before the eruption. On June 1st, a swarm of earthquakes, and the night of June 1st is when they saw the fissure system opening high on the southwest flank. So those flows stalled at 9,000 feet, but then they saw other fissures open lower in the Southwest Rift between 10,500 and 8,500 feet, and below around the 8,000 foot mark as well. So when the lava had popped out in this area, then the pattern says that it doesn't go back to the summit. It doesn't go to the northeast rift. It continues to put out into that arm of the volcano. So the southwest rift took all of the magma. There was a lot of lava coming out. Dane did quite a big review of this eruption, so I'll let him add some comments here in just a minute. But they note here that 3 hours after the lowest fissures opened here, the first flow crossed Highway 11, entered the ocean, destroyed a gas station, post office, and several homes. It was also making ocean entry, putting out that cloud of acid gas. These are all just things to imagine we would have to deal with were this to happen again anytime soon. 14 and a half hours after ocean begins, another flow crosses the highway. The second flow destroys several homes and enters the ocean about a mile south of the first flow. Both of those end after about a day. There's another set of fissures open up. Another flow that goes farther south than the two flows. And that one lasts for 3 weeks, going to the ocean. Before everything ends on June 23rd, Ho'okina fishing village was destroyed, including post office, church, gas station, cemetery, and 5 to 6 homes. Structures of fame of the time, the Magoon Ranch, the Ohia Lodge, and other cottages destroyed. There was one man who was looking after cattle that was trapped for 28 hours between two flows before being rescued by the Coast Guard. They note that 35 homestead lots were later opened in Kona for people whose property had been lost by lava in 1950. So similarly to the discussions we have nowadays about living in risky areas and relocation, there is a note of that happening in Mauna Loa as well post 1950. All in all, that eruption was the largest volume eruption of the southwest rift of Mauna Loa since written records began. Magma is building in the volcano again now, and that is still our biggest fear, is that southwest rift goes and something like 1950 happens again. Were that to happen today, the impacts would be pretty crazy, huh, Dane?
Yeah, happening today would be a lot more damage and a lot more impact on the island and the economy and things along those lines. This was really in the past 150 years, the biggest potential. This kind of shows the worst case on Mauna Loa as we see it on the Southwest Rift Zone. Besides giant earthquakes in the 1868, that scenario. But in terms of lava flow impact, this is the one. The main reason that it's thought of as so damaging, besides the multiple flows coming down, is the speed at which they advance. The first flow came down, took roughly 9 hours, and then subsequent flows took roughly the same time, other than one flow that took roughly 3 hours, moving much quicker. Now these are those distances, or that from the rift zone to the ocean. That's a lot longer of a distance than it is now from the rift zone to inhabited areas people live or work or occupy. That impact would be faster. And that just means less time to react. So we've talked about it before with Mauna Loa. The eruption starts at the summit, and it either stays at the summit or then it moves into one of the rift zones. Once it moves into one of the rift zones, it likes to stay in that rift zone. But from there, you can get these flows like the one Phil is showing you now from 1950 that move down those steep slopes on that southwest rift zone. And we even have Ocean View, the Hawaiian Ocean View Estates community there inside the rift zone partially. So lava can be impacting people very quickly on this type of eruption if it were to occur today.
Yeah, next
And
thing,
that's
yeah.
ignoring all of the impacts from fog and fallout and road closures and evacuation difficulties. Like, we're
Right.
just not diving into all of that, essentially. And just saying this scenario again today, we would have to be ready for, or it would be potentially very damaging, beyond damaging, dangerous, and potentially involving the loss of life if things went sideways.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So many fewer people at that point in time living the island than today, right? That's the biggest difference and everything that comes with it. And look, people walking up to the flow in this video here, and I can't imagine what kind of chaos would ensue if this was happening today, right? Evacuations, people trying to go and see it at the same time, going where they shouldn't be. Anyways,
I would expect, just because of the way we only have one road, it's a 2-lane road, one in each direction, in and out of that community that wraps around the island. Just out of necessity, that road has to be closed in via one direction, so there's only 2 lanes out, essentially.
Yeah.
So I don't know even you're going to get anywhere close to this type of eruption. The best bet, we've talked about, if you have a southwest rift zone eruption, where do you see it from? Well, there's one spot that maybe on an old road that might be good, but really your best bet would be out in the ocean. And then you can get whatever angle you want.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so yeah, we'll come back to this topic in the future, right? We're trying to work with Ocean View as well to try to improve preparedness out there. I know out there they still have a long way to come. We all have a long way to come together, on island to be ready for that. And yeah, good to be aware of that and more of that in the future. All right, so that's our volcano watch. And I thought, since we talked about Mauna Loa, I should really wrap things up here by just touching base on Mauna Loa this week, since we've skipped it a couple weeks here. The USGS does have a recent monthly update back from July 3rd. Nothing unusual here. In the end, we show only minor inflation beneath the summit as the volcano recovers from 2022 and magma refills the reservoir system. So nothing major changing there. There are still some small earthquakes happening. Here's a view from the summit earlier today. And if we look at some of the signals, we see that the tilt meter also saw the Alaska earthquake up on Mauna Loa. And otherwise, we see just normal variations, very few earthquakes over time, very low earthquake counts every single day, and kind of scattered with no real significant pattern there as well. So the most important thing here, earthquakes per week, these are all kind of within a background range. Here's depth for the last year over time. Occasionally we see these deeper events that may be related to the magma system at depth. If I come back to the 5 years, you see it more clearly, right? Here's a 5 years build up to 2022 with the escalation in the months just before, and quiet really since. In this third phase here, that's the lowest seismicity we've seen yet. So here's the earthquakes ever since. There's the actual eruption buildup, and eruption happens there. And following that, we had some of these deep earthquake swarms that led to, seems like, rising magma on occasion, filling the volcano, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little more steadily, but overall is just causing it to swell and grow further apart from north to south. There's earthquakes for the last week, month, and year. It's really not a whole lot. But if you see the last year, then you have an idea here of what parts of the volcano are active and filling that summit area, and then somewhat of the root of it right in here as well. So that's really it for Mauna Loa here. The important thing, we have our GPS back online. The summit's spreading north and south, getting further apart. And it is rising, unlike Kilauea, showing the filling of the summit reservoir area. So it's causing it to swell up without any outlet, and therefore growing upwards and outwards at the same time. So it's very slowly building, but building someday to its next eruption. So that's all we have for Mauna Loa, and that's it for this week, Dane. I'm going to turn to some questions or discussions, then now's the time. Get muted.
Let's go ahead and do that. First, I want to go ahead and acknowledge some super chats that came through, as well as some donations over on hveri.org/donate. So first we had a $10 from Norm. I believe I went through that one, but I'll just shout it out again. Thank you. And then $10 from Raven. It says, thank you for all the hard work the team does. Appreciate the support there. Joshua G comes through with a $20 donation over on the website, and followed by Gregory with a 25. And last but not least, longtime supporter Don comes in with $5 for pizza. Friday eruptive episode redeemable at Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park. Appreciate it there. So yeah, we can go ahead and get into some questions at this point.
Mahalo, everybody, for that. We really appreciate your support.
We did have one from Norm, so throw it out there. Was there any signs of new movement, outside of Hale Mau, signs of an eruption or magma movement underground in other rift zone areas?
The short answer is no. Nothing that we've seen or nothing the USGS has reported. Yeah. Awesome. Just a matter of time, it seems like. We keep looking, but it hasn't happened yet. So enjoy it while it lasts.
All right. Cindy asks, is it normal to have earthquakes alternating between deep and shallow repeated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have the best answer necessarily. It's not uncommon on Kilauea, for example, if you have something happening shallow at the summit, some kind of eruption, that you can induce some flow from deeper to come up. So you could have like these long period earthquakes happening deep down in response to something happening in the surface, for example, or in advance of something happening in the surface. And depending on how that goes, it might seem like they eventually start alternating as well there. So that's the best I can offer for discussion, Cindy. I don't have anything great there. It really depends on the actual, I think, the specific situation, the dynamics and the structure and the forces and all that, like what you're really dealing with for there to be earthquakes repeated and for them to go shallow and deeper and shallow. In 2018, we saw something like that, right? Where we saw, because it was like a ring, that was like a piston that was dropping in. We saw that earthquakes would occur in the same places repeatedly, and it would kind of occur in a sequence where we saw the thing moving to collapse, and then we made it collapse again, and so then you had something more akin to what I believe you're describing.
All right.
So yeah, there's some options.
All right, one from Raven. Appreciate the support again. I'm curious, if the tephra slope continues downward and say it possibly covers the north vent, will the eruptions occur somewhere else in the caldera? Could that jam it up?
You suppose so? I mean, I suppose it could, right? But it's gonna get out somewhere, and wherever the easiest place is, might be the place that has the rock that's 90% air as opposed to 70%, as opposed to 30% air, and that's where the tephra actually is, in the same place where it is now. So I believe it'll stay in the same area and keep coming out of the north vent. I'm not convinced the south vent is dead yet myself. I think if the north vent were to get clogged, then maybe you'd force the south vent to open again. I think there is some geometry down there of some funny shape that it's hard for us to know and predict what would happen if we were to block one or the other of the things in the surface, really, right?
I just remember.
But ultimately,
go ahead.
Yeah, ultimately, what I was saying earlier on is like when these functions are occurring, there is some thought that they're originating 500, 600, 700 feet below the surface. Way, like the source is way down there. We're talking about, can I put a little bit of chewing gum into my gun barrel and stop the bullet coming out? Right? There's a whole long barrel beneath this that's not getting gummed up necessarily. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Dane?
Yeah, so I just remember in one of the previous episodes, probably a half dozen or a dozen ago, where a wannabe hornado formed over the north vent, and it had seemingly a cap on it
to go with it, with like a cap and a chimney coming out of it, a small little hole. And we were wondering what would happen when the eruption started. That thing just got blown apart. Like there was zero evidence of it being there after the next vent or the next fountain came. Just removed all of the superficial top layer stuff from the path and just, put a huge amount of lava out of there. The pressure that it has to have to throw that much material, how much it weighs with that much viscosity that high into the air has to be absolutely mind-boggling. So to be like, oh, we're going to stop it with, or it's going to get stopped by even a little bit of debris or a lot of debris, it'll crack the ground and come back out type of thing. Like that's a huge amount of pressure to do that. How about just dislodging the thing? I don't know. It's
right. Yeah. So it's not uncommon. So, during a pool era, many pool eruptions occurred not only out of the main conduit, but also along little bits of fissures that stick out the bottom of the cone and the sides, because you can push through a big pile of cinder and leak lava out even without fountaining it, because you can push cinder out of the way because it's fairly light.
Right. I do like how you compared it to a gun barrel with a piece of bubble gum over it. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah, maybe it'll deflect it a tiny amount for a tiny split second, but it's inconsequential. It's going to get out of there, right? Like, there was something that happened that you guys were calling a blowout of the north vent a while ago, where we saw like another small little mini fountain come out like from the base of the thing off to the side. Similar thing where you have, that vent is just cinder and spatter also, and if it's not very solid and there's that much pressure down inside of the thing, why can't it leak out or crack to the side over there if it can't come out of the top? So the top gets gummed up. It's not going to stop it coming out. It's going to maybe muddy the nozzle, like it's going to come out in different areas and more funny ways, but it's not going to not come out. It's going to come out in a different way, right? And after it clears that pathway, then it's going to have this 500-foot barrel to shoot out of again, right? Unless we believe that all 500 feet of that thing are full of hard lava, which we don't, because we see it glowing and pistoning, which means that the lava is actually liquid in the barrel, just rising and falling, right? And then that's what's really stopping it from fountaining out, right? So,
all right, we got
there's a lot happening under the surface there. Yeah,
we got a couple more questions. But first, I want to just highlight the poll that we ran. We ran one last week. We're running it again this week. And just to see how people are feeling about it. Oh, I need to click that other button first. So, when will the episode 29 begin? The most popular answer is early morning tomorrow until before 8 a.m. So, sometime between midnight and 8 a.m. in the early morning hours. Followed by tomorrow afternoon after 4 p.m. And then we have some fill in there, but nobody's really buying into that it erupts before midnight tonight. So after we get off the air, it goes. But it might happen. We've seen it sneak up on us a little bit before. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that. Thanks for everybody that threw in a little bit of your Mauna Loa over there. All right. And I will bring back up the live view and getting to the next question for Phil. I have a question from Riley who asks, why do you think the glow in the north vent is not that bright? I saw an answer from Dawn saying it's just the cone's growing.
Yeah, may well be, right. Like, we have a very deep conduit that we know is that, what I've just been saying for the last few answers here, that's that 100 meters down to the original ground surface. The other thing that I'll add is what we saw in the first sequence I showed, which is the cone has been slumping, right? And I've been looking, it's hard to really see how much of that cone movement is happening just uphill of that hole. I've been wondering, is there stuff falling in the hole, right? More so than before. The higher this ramp gets up here to the left, okay? And the higher the fountains are, and this is a giant slope that leads to, looks like a bathtub drain hole almost, right? Like, how much stuff is falling back in the hole is my question. And in that case, right, our column of lava that's in there rising and falling has a more solid or rubble cap on top, And if that were to happen, then that might be one reason you might have less glow. Is you have the stuff in there, you can see it seismically moving, and you do see glow where it is kind of pushing up closer to the surface. But that's one of the questions, right? What is causing the glow? Is it something deeper down? Is it just a crust on that cap? Is it stuff falling in and blocking it? How blocked is it? I think those are all questions that are reasonable to have that we're all asking and talking about here. And yeah, good question.
Right. Last one. We'll throw it out from Brett, who asked, following up on our Mauna Loa discussion. Another question about Mauna Loa is, so there's 50% of it going off in the rift zone. Is it then 50% for it staying at the summit? Is it the same odds for both rift zones, or is one more likely than the other, just on the historical side of things?
I don't remember the numbers right now, right? But I think it's actually 50% chance of it staying at the summit and 50% it goes into the rift. And I think it's like a little more like it's maybe not half and half, but maybe a little more likely.
I think it was I think there was like one off on the north side, and then 2022, like to even it out, it would have had to gone south, but it went north, so we went like 2 more on the record than on the south. But I'm like, that's so close, and our sample size sucks anyways, that I'd just say basically the same. It's a coin flip in the wind.
Yeah, and then you could play other games that we're doing in 2022, like, well, more recently they've come to the Northeast Rift more often. Then so what's your time bucket, and how how far back are you averaging? Because then you can really get different results like that too.
Good points.
Yeah. So it's a great question. Right. Yeah, and it's sometimes it'll go to the summit and that's it, and that's the most likely thing to happen, right? And in any case, I think my attitude, and we've discussed this here as well, is like we need to practice evacuating more often. If there's some eruption and there's not a flank eruption, then we got a free run in and practice, right? If it does come to the flank, then you actually have started soon enough to actually make a difference.
Civil Defense is implemented a once a year protocol or a practice to use that access road to escape out of Waikoloa Village. Now, I just found out today that Civil Defense is upping that to 2 a year in order to capture the snowbirds and people that aren't here during the other part of the year. So I'm like, great. Now we just have to take that new idea and apply it to Ocean View and Milili'i and places that could get rapidly inundated with a lava flow in a worst case scenario on the southwest rift zone.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I think that does it.
I'll add one more thing to that. There's the last question back, right? Like, like why is it not glowing, whatever else? And I talked about stuff falling in. There's one kind of cool caveat I'll throw out there as like a thought nugget for anyone who's interested in this. When you have stuff that's degassed and colder falling back into the lava column in there, then it actually can cause more crystals to grow because it's cooling down what's in there. And that can cause the whole thing to become more of a plug at the top there, right? And so after the fact, maybe after this eruption is long over, we'll hopefully get results of all the different crystals and analyses to do. Maybe be able to actually tell us more of how deep down was and how much was it, were the crystals growing during these inter episode periods and all that kind of cool stuff like that. So there's all kinds of weird stuff happening, and hopefully we can talk more dynamics coming up in the future here. But that's it for me, Dane. I'll cut myself off there.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Our normal program, it comes on at 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time every Thursday. Unless something happens, we're not counting the new episode. Those are kind of expected at this point. It's amazing how used to 1,000-foot fountains we are, but we are. And if it gets outside of the caldera, does something, dramatically different, yeah, we'll go live. But other than that, we'll be back next Thursday, 5 p.m. If you want to stay in touch, we recommend the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group. Big community there. They share a bunch of amazing photos. Bunch of people up there right now waiting for it to go in case it goes tonight even. So, that's the community of enthusiasts and the volcano buffs, so to speak. And we'd love to have you over there, the Hawaii Tracker on Facebook group. I think that's it for me.
All right. Mahalo, Dane. Mahalo to everyone who stuck with us here. I see 85 viewers still, an hour and 40 minutes in here. Mahalo to our ASL interpreters, as always, and our deaf community. That takes all of us working together, so we appreciate every single one of you guys out there watching us live or after the fact. And yeah, from us at a nonprofit, HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, for Lou Itori, Dano and Carrie, and Dane DuPont, I'm Philip Ong. Until next week, aloha, everybody.